Hey everyone, this is Meyer, and in this video I'm going to be doing a track walkthrough of my song Blame It on Envy with Marinala. Anyway, this track was released on Black Hole a couple of months ago. I apologize. I try to make these track walkthroughs every time I come out with a new song, but I was late on this for a lot of reasons. One of them was I was defending my PhD thesis, so now I'm a doctor. But also number two was this was a track I had made with a lot of VST2 plugins, and I had to reinstall all of my... I tried to just completely wipe my computer, only use VST3, but to make this video I had to install a bunch of my old plugins, and the only one I can't install or I wasn't able to install now is a VST2 version of this Waves PS22 stereo spreader. So my advice to you is use VST3 from now on. This track originally started not as a vocal track, it started as a just kind of like a tech trance tune. Back in 2022 is when I think I started working on it, and it was the main melody, it was this other synth part that I'll show you, I'm really excited to show you, and it didn't have vocals, and it was Reorder who was like, hey, you should turn this into a vocal track, so introduced me to Marinala, and she wrote the lyrics, and I wanted something dark, something aggressive, so hence the Blame It on Envy part. So I'm not going to go through everything in this track because there's a lot to go through. I want to hit the highlights. If you do want to see me go through everything, I would say go ahead and check out my advanced trance masterclass here in Ableton Live. I'll have a link for that in the description. What I really want to do is hit the highlights, hit what I do that's different. But if there's anything you want me to go over, leave me a comment. I'm a pretty open book, happy to go through, what I use and kind of how I do certain things. So I guess the first thing to do is to kind of talk about the leads. I have a lot. This is a massive stack. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 leads, and there's some plucks, and then this counter melody, which I'll show you, which is really, really important to the sound. So this is what the leads sound like. And there's a bunch of different ones. Some of these I just typically use because I find they work well together. This first one is the legendary saw from the Serum Producer Special from Reorder. This is a kind of, I call it a Sean Tyas-y kind of lead. You can find this in a bank. I think I have this sound in my bank with Reorder. You can find that on Armada. So this has a lot more side information, whereas this one's very mono and very bright. So together, this is the main body, I think. And then we got a few more. We got this one that's actually doing something different with the MIDI. So these two are both doing that main kind of ARP, this one, and then this one's kind of just playing. Almost a pluck, but then I also have this other pluck that's kind of doing more of a pluck kind of thing. Now I've frozen most of the stuff, or me recording and trying to play all these tracks would just cause my CPU to catch fire. And one of the things you'll find if you look at the melody, it's playing this very simple pattern. What's really doing it is the delay that's filling in those spaces. And this is something to think about. I'm playing basically what are dotted eighth notes. Da, 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 da. But the delay is filling in those gaps. And I think the easiest way to see that is if I was to actually, let me just unfreeze this and turn off the delay. You're also hearing that Arts Acoustic reverb on there. Love it. But the delay is filling in the gaps. So I have the delay here set to 1/4, 1/4. So playing dotted eighth with the delay. It causes a little hangover, and then with the reverb, that's what really helps it. So this is a very simple sound, but I like using it. You can find this euphoric plug. I'm pretty sure this is in my bank with Reorder, my Silent One bank, something very similar to this. So again, with these preset packs that I make, they're sounds that I'm using in all my tracks. Yeah, whether you want to sound like me or not, I guess. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but yeah, no, it's fun. So there's this pluck and this one that are kind of doing the same thing. This one's kind of in its own bus, but again, I don't typically use these leads buses and Plux bus. I do everything on a leads and Plux bus where I do all the processing. So pretty standard SSL type of compressor, the bus compressor, into an Arts acoustic reverb, and into another SSL compressor. Yeah, that's what you're going to see. So there's that, and then here's SSL number 2. So again, what I'm really trying to do compressor before is just kind of shaping the sound. The one after is helping glue the reverb to the sound. So again, it's a very standard way of processing it, but that's what I find that works. And then the LFO tool is on the leads and Plux bus, but pretty much after all of the processing, other than the stuff that can go after like the widener, doing some stuff with the leads to kind of just push the stereo image out a little bit. Again, that's a by taste basis, case by case, taste by taste basis, whether it works with that track. So anyway, sorry, I've been getting a little distracted here because we got the Plux. Let's see the next lead here. It's kind of like a half lead and a half pluck. And one of the things you'll hear some of the trance producers out there, I think Sean Tyas will say this, I think Alan Morrow will say this, is don't be afraid to use a pluck or a lead that's half open, layered with your main leads to kind of help give it that extra attack and that extra pluck sound. That'll also help engage the compressor. So when you play this with these, this is kind of adding some low mid energy, and it's also kind of adding a little bit of pluckiness to the compressor. Then this is this low mid lead. Again, part open, but there to kind of bolster up the lower end. This might be the Cyclone lead from, well, let's see. What could this be? The Cyclone lead, I think it was, oh my goodness. Alan Watts, I believe, has this bank with this, and it's just great for just boosting the low mids. So that's where I got that from. I think it's the Alan Watts volume 2. Yeah, the Cyclone, the lead Cyclone. It's great. I've modified it a little bit, but you get that kind of full-bodied sound. So listen to it with and without this. And I think those lower frequencies are triggering the compressor a little bit, so it just kind of helps center the sound. I mean, it's amazing what that does, even though on its own, it's not playing that high end. So again, it's good to listen to each of your leads in context to make sure they're all adding. And then lastly, this kind of photographer style lead. Just playing the top notes along with this Lonely for You type of lead. Again, these are ugly on their own a little bit. They have pitch modulation, they have all this other stuff. Not something that sounds pleasant. But with everything else, it adds color. It's a color lead. Listen to it with them. So again, it really helps fill out what needs to be filled out. So don't be afraid, again, to use something like that on the top, just playing those top notes. So what you can do is just grab your MIDI, grab the top notes here, of course, like these, or not that, like those, and then just basically you can delete the other stuff, or you can use 0 on your number pad. I can't do it to this because it's a frozen track, but that'll just grab those notes. So you can do it to these, and I can just grab these notes, hit 0 on the num pad to disable them, and then you're just playing those top notes. And then sometimes it's worth it to just go in here, just make them a little bit longer, again, so that you're getting that extra modulation over the top. Something that's hard to do when you're playing these ARPs, when you're playing one note and playing another one that's longer, it's tricky. So I typically like having the arps playing these top notes being the 16th notes, being just kind of the blocks. And then I've even shortened these a little bit to give it a little bit more rhythm. I feel like it gives it more rhythm. And then these top ones, they're longer. They're playing the same rhythm. It's just the top notes, but I'm able to stretch them because I don't have those lower ones playing on the same sound. So something you can even do is just take your arp, split it up, and use the same sound, make these shorter and make these longer, but you don't have to worry about polyphony. You can then have a balance between the level of your top notes and the level of your bottom notes independently. That's something that's a little bit trickier to do. Yes, you could do it here with velocity, but using the velocity is a little trickier. I find it easier to just duplicate the thing, delete the bottom notes on one, delete the top notes on the other, and then just have them there. So I don't have any of the sounds here that are just playing the bottom notes, but you will see in some of my other projects, I'll do that. I'll split up the lead, so then I can just adjust the level of the bottom and the top separately. The thing that, then what I do is I have this kind of counter melody pluck. Now, one of the things I've done with this is on the leads bus. I said I don't usually do processing here, but what I've done here is I've used the Neutron 4 unmasked. Now, this thing can be incredibly CPU intensive, but what I'm doing is I'm having it duck. It's basically like a sidechain compressor, but it's a frequency specific sidechain compressor. So what's going on is when this is playing the do any of the counter melodies, it's going to duck the leads down only in those frequencies. So it's going to cause, basically there's this phenomenon called frequency masking. When two sounds are playing at the same time in the same frequencies, those frequencies can overlap. And if you remove those frequencies when they're playing together from one of the sounds, your brain kind of fills it in. So it kind of gives you more headroom because it's like a psychoacoustic phenomena, but it doesn't end up taking away from the sound. So this is one of the fun things we can do with this. So if you listen to the leads, I'll play it here and then you'll hear this come in. Or maybe you won't. Let's go ahead. It's very, 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 very subtle, but it's dipping the mids and some of the highs whenever this is playing. And the reason I'm doing that is the counter melody doesn't play as often, so when it does come in, I want it to sit on top of the leads. I don't want it to get buried under the mix, and I don't want to have to boost the gain. So this is one way you don't have things fighting for headroom in your mix. You're kind of carving space for the things that come in when you need to. The other thing I have going on is I got this kind of call and response with this and the piano. So you'll hear this come in. Of course. One of the things I did is I didn't put that on the leads and plucks bus because one of the things that I'm doing is I am routing these plucks through the leads and plucks bus. So if you see the way that this is routed, the leads and plucks bus, I'm using the same reverb for this counter pluck and for this other one. So one of the reasons I'm using the unmask on the leads bus is so it's only ducking this kind of sub part of the sound. It's a little complicated to see because this is really just a group. The melodic stuff is just a group that's not really doing, I wouldn't call it a bus because I'm not doing any processing on it. It's just so I can kind of open and collapse it as needed. But again, what you're seeing here is you're seeing me be able to put processing just on the leads. And then of course I have this, I don't know what I did, this intro leads bus. That's of course for the intro, but that doesn't matter as much. It's just, again, one lead. It doesn't need to be crazy when the intro because we're just kind of teasing it. So I'm gonna just keep that close. Again, there's nothing really all that noteworthy going on there. What is noteworthy in this area, and actually let me first say too, is I've layered the piano. I've done what I was talking about with the leads, with the lower and higher notes, but I've done that with the piano, playing lower and higher octaves. And so what you can see here is I'm using Nexus here, actually true pianos for the piano, and then I layered it with Nexus. But then what I did is this is actually playing an octave higher on the piano. So it's the same line, and rather than do it with MIDI and with velocity, I just have it on a separate channel. So let me just go ahead and play this section, just the pianos. That's the top one. So these are the lower ones. One of them I like the attack, the other one, I think the Nexus one, I like the body of it. It just was a little more full. So this is that sparkle, and again I have separate volume control over that, which is easier than having the octaves layered here and then having to, I want to pull the top ones down. You have to select the right notes, but then what if they overlap because you're playing different octaves? So again, it was easier for me to do it this way. So don't be afraid to split up your instruments like this, where you're just having one playing the upper one. It's almost frustrating for me to try to explain this when I'm not doing it live and I'm not creating it from scratch. That's how much I like the teaching aspect of it, but hopefully you can see I've already done that because of how easy it is to manage in the long run. And again, it shouldn't take up that much more CPU doing that, because what you're doing is it's still going to be playing that many notes polyphony wise anyway. So you do get a savings running them on the same instrument, like if I was doing it here, but again, you're having to create those voices regardless, so it doesn't matter as much. You get a little more overhead at the beginning from just running the two instances, but you're still only playing basically one note per channel. So yeah, it'd be interesting to measure that, but that is something to think about. One of the fun parts about this track was this melody that I have here when the leads are coming out. So the second half of the drop, I have this counter melody. Here it comes. Actually, this one, it's a Spire preset that I basically made from this triple saw pluck. I think this is in here under the My Bank from Armada, your plucks triple saw. Something, I think it's in here. I believe it is. This is just an old version of the bank. But I've completely reworked it. It's not a pluck at all. It's just a lead. Now there's two that are playing, but the one on top is really just a color laid. This is just a layer from Zebra. It's a weird sound. And don't be afraid. Have your main sound that has your body, that has the sound you like, that's very standard. And then you can layer something weird on top of it. And again, you have your separate control over that. So this is the main one. And on this, there is modulation galore. You can see what I did is I used the legato so that the sound would kind of bend. Actually, I think I used the pitch bend, the bend wheel. So you can see I have the mod wheel on here. And then I think to get the pitch bend, I think what I had to do is, let's see if I did it under. Oh, of course they're going to change it here in the new live. Envelopes, here it is. And MIDI control, pitch bend. So yeah, you can see I'm bending the notes. So this is how I got a transition from this note to this note. Rather than needing to have the legato on, where I still want to be hitting these notes, what I did is I bent this note, and then basically this is basically one semitone. So the bend here on the synth, if you look at what the synth patch has, the bend range is, if I can find where this is, yes, up, down. 2 semitones up and down, which means half of a semitone would be half of this range. So this is about half. If you think this goes all the way up to about 8,000, this is around 4,000. So this note, this B, is 1 semitone below this. So to get this bending sound, I just basically, when this note started, boom, I immediately shot it up, shot the bend up, and then brought it back down. So that's why it sounds like at this point the note is bending down, even though I'm not really playing it legato. I'm not having mono legato on. And this goes through. Again, this is a kind of like a counter melody. It's sitting on top of the leads. And then what I wanted to do here is I wanted this synth to kind of morph into the kick drum. So what I basically did is I set up the modulation on this lead so that it would basically, if I can find where it went, here it is. And I used all these macros to do this. So there's a lot of, in the mod matrix, me mapping each of these mod macros. Basically what I wanted to do is morph this waveform into a sine and have a pitch envelope, because the way you get a kick drum like sound is you get a swept sine wave with a pitch envelope. So you get a sine wave and you sweep the pitch from high to low. So what these are doing, and it's probably easier if I play it. So one is basically getting that pitch envelope. And then two turns it into a sine wave. So with these together, and then what these are going to have to do is take down some of the effects and some of the other modulation that's going on. So that one's the filter. And then 4 brings the pitch down. So that's what I basically did. And then what you need to do is just kind of look at the automation of all these damn macros. Actually, let me return all the parts. Here we go. And here come those macros. Here comes the actual kick. And then it all comes back in. The sub bass, really, I just use silent. I froze it and flattened it, but you don't really need to do that. Sometimes some producers, they feel like, oh, the way it re-triggers, it's better to have it as audio. I don't really find that to be true, but sometimes it's nice to freeze and flatten so you can just see the waveforms and just see where it's going to be hitting, and you have the length, you have everything you need. So yeah, kick and bass, again, nothing really all that special. Dave Parkinson kick. Oh yeah, and then I just have this little loop I've just kind of filtered out and just tried to use the high end. Again, it was almost like a side trance. Really, I could have done this with any bass line and then just use like sample rate reduction on it. But it's fun to sometimes play with mid-bass audio that just layers, because you've kind of already done a lot of the MIDI and you're just kind of like, oh, what other rhythms and other melodies would work well with this? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So that's something you can try. Sometimes, I'll have all this MIDI going on and then you'll see like an audio track in here, and it's just because, oh, I like that aspect of this particular audio sound, and I wouldn't have thought to do the MIDI in that way in that moment. So that's the fun part about using audio, and then you can chop it up, rearrange it, and do all sorts of stuff that you'd want to do with that. So again, the kick and bass isn't really anything all that out of the ordinary for this track. This is that kind of FME ARP. I use this all the time. You can find something like this in that Spire Bank. I have at Armada. Really fun thing. But what's really, I think, adding a lot are these different acid lines. So there's a lot of these different acids. And one of the things I tried to do was add a call and response. So you can really hear this when the sub comes in. This is this kind of first acid. So that's this, and you see the mod wheel. The mod wheel is just mapped to the filter cutoff. So really what you're seeing this do, man, I probably can't unfreeze too many more of these, but is it's just, that's the call. and then this is the response. So that's, I think, what's really giving the track a lot of drive. Again, it can be difficult to find stuff you can do that's really making things interesting in these sections. And this is where I think those acid lines and atmospheres really do a lot. And you can see here, I'm not just using that E, I'm going up to the G, which is kind of a third up. Again, gives it that minor feel. You're emphasizing the minor third, which makes it sound dark. So that's one thing you can do. What I find, bass lines, the easiest note obviously is your root note here in E minor. The next easiest one to use is probably the fifth, which in this case would be the B. So you go scale notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then that third works really well as well. You can also do these semitones down, like 1 or 2 semitones down, like the D, or if you're in major, the D sharp. That's a really popular note to use. But again, even when you're keeping on the same bass line, it helps. But again, this is just a loop. This isn't really changing all that much. So I want to add other dynamics when things are coming in. So again, I relied very, very heavily on that acid. And then just this kind of atmospheric pluck, you know, really just basic saw pluck that we have there. And then the vocals come in. From the inside. And as for processing on the vocal, there is quite a bit. What's going on here is UAD, this is just auto-tune. So again, this is just some tuning. Somebody close the door from the inside. And that speed, again, finding the speed that works really well is really important. I'm just matching the key, and then look, if you bump that up, you're gonna get that auto-tune effect. Somebody close the door from the inside. I mean, if you want to have T-Pain singing it, I love T-Pain. But not the vibe I was going for this one. Going through Neutron, just kind of for some basic dynamics, a little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression. What I think is doing a lot is this LA2A. I find that works really well in vocals. And then the RX10 de-esser. This is huge. This is one of the best de-essers you could find. There are other good ones too, but this is just the one that I like using. Somebody close the door. Actually, the easiest thing to do is if I just turn all this stuff off and kind of add them one by one. And then at the end is this EQ, just a dynamic. And one of the things I learned from Reorder is using this to do your delays. So this is another copy of the vocal track, but what you have on here is the echo. And this is just me taking part of the vocal that I want to use for a delay and just kind of doing it manually. Having this sound and then just having it here. And you can do that with a preset is just basically turn it to all the way wet, and then you kind of get that radio voice delay. So let me turn that off for now. Here comes the LA2A. We're going to turn that on. Waves RVox. Now, this sounds a lot better because it's adding gain. That's the thing that's tricky, right? Is knowing what's actually adding to the sound and what's actually just making it louder. RVox, this is another Waves plugin. It's great for vocals. It's just a compressor, but it has the settings that are just there for vocals, so it works really well, and it's very nice. This SSL channel strip. Somebody
close the door from the inside, leaving me empty, leaving me empty.
Just EQ, basic stuff. Then what I found is that EQ was causing the sibilants to come back. So adding another de-esser.
Somebody close the door
And really these de-essers, there's not really magic numbers for this. This is just something that you got to listen and say, hey, it's getting sibilant, it's getting harsh. What should I do? What should I add? I think the things that'll always make sense to have in your vocal chain are something like an LA2A. Obviously, you need to have some compression. I think the RVox does a great job of that. The LA2A is like a compressor, but it's an optocompressor, so it has a lot of tone shaping to it. So that combined with the RVox really is what gives it the character. And then that's going through the Soundtoys Echo Boy.
Somebody close the door from the inside.
And then lastly, the sidechain reverb. And this is done with the group so that the compressor can be triggered on the wet from the dry signal. So again, what this is doing is it's just ducking the reverb whenever the dry signal is coming through. Really nice to keep that vocal up front, but you still get that nice tail.
Somebody close the door from the inside.
So you can see at the end there, that's when it releases. That's when the compressor releases, and that's where you get that reverb tail, but you don't have the reverb muddying up the mix and making it difficult to hear what she's saying when she's talking. So that's really nice using the sidechain compressor, but this is basically a sidechain compressor only on the reverb tail. So, and yeah, that's, I mean, I guess, I don't know if it's like, that's all there is, but that's really what's going on there with the vocal. Again, what's really doing it is that RVox and the channel strip.
Somebody close the door from the inside, leaving me empty, leaving me empty.
One of the things that's difficult is getting a vocal that's up front without being sibilant. Again, that's where your de-essers are going to help, making it bright without being thin. And that's where there's just a lot of tweaking to be done. But again, the standard is you do your tuning, you do any of your pitch correction before you hit the chain. You then do all of your compression, you do all of your kind of shaping. Then you can hit it with your effects, your reverb, your delay, all of that stuff after. But then it's really nice if you're going to use delay, if you're going to do anything like that, have that sidechain compressor on the tail because you want that vocal to be up front when it's going on. So that's something that's really good to know. Let's see. So we got the pianos, these pads. These are really basic. I didn't go all that crazy with them. This Nexus Airwave Transsaws, it's a great patch. Pad 2 is a pad with like a phaser or flanger. Again, giving it movement so you're not just having one sound that's big front and center. This pad 1 is the main body. It's really providing that big kind of wall of sound, helping with the leads there, fill in those gaps. Pad 2 is giving a little bit of movement. Either one on their own. Pad 1 on its own could be too static, could be too boring. Pad 2 on its own, it's moving too much, so you're losing the effect of the actual wall that you'd want to have. And then pad 3, adding a little bit of high mid. Just kind of filling in that gap there. That would be where you want to have it. The last thing I want to talk about are some of the atmospheres. So I tend to use a lot of audio samples or render things down to audio samples. You see some synths, you see some other things. What I will typically do is I'll go to Splice and I'll just say, what are the vocal atmospheres, the atmospheres, and I'll put in the key. Sometimes I'll do minor, E minor, whatever, and then just see what they have. And then from there, it's just reversing stuff, adding a bunch of reverb to stuff, duplicating the track, and just kind of mixing everything in. Where you really need those are your first bit of the track, I would say the first 64 bars, and then from your outro to where the song ends. Those are the two areas in which you're going to rely heavily on your atmospheres. And then your breakdown, you can have some as well. But what I did in the breakdown is I actually use Omnisphere to get quite a bit of these atmospheres, and these are things that are basically just playing the sub pad melody, so the chord progression, the bass notes, the chord progression, but just doing different things. And Omnisphere is great for doing this. You just kind of go into the soundscapes or whatever, and you just try different ones until you find something that sounds good. So it's like a saw pad, but it's got a lot of distortion on it. So it gives it that movement, gives it that extra whatever. I think this might be like a glass bowl. We'll see. So you got those kind of, they're doing the same as the sub pad is, if I can find where that is up here. So this works really well in those sections where you want your sub pad to be just giving that low mid support underneath the lead. It's playing something constant. It's not doing all this weird stuff. And then you're adding all of that on top. That's not going to be doing the low end. Notice how I took the low frequencies out of all of these because I don't want them interfering with that sub pad. They're just kind of like the sparkle on top. So the sub pad is like the bass. It's that kind of fundamental. It's securing you to what the melody is going to do. It's securing you to the chord progression. And then these are all just kind of following that, but they're able to do the weirdness. So again, when it comes to layering, have that one sound in the center. Have that one sound that's doing the standard thing. That's doing the thing that is straightforward. That's the main body of the sound, the bread and butter. And then you can add the sauce and the sparkle on top that I think without losing the support, without losing the main sound that you have. You're adding something extra, but you're not taking away from what you need it to have, the kind of constantness of it, I guess you will. So when the breakdown comes in, vocal atmospheres, really soft. And this is where what you want to have is you want to have a send bus, I in my opinion, with just a wet reverb on, because then you can send each of these. Some of these you might want more reverb than others, and it will just destroy your CPU if you try to put a reverb on every single channel. So rather than doing that, you just have a send bus, and you'll see some of these I don't send to the delay at all, or I send very little to the reverb. This is one I know I wanted that. Even when I stop playing the sound, you're still getting that reverb tail. And then again, chopping it up, fading it up, finding the parts of each of these sounds. That's kind of the fun part. You just kind of rummage through the crates and you find the samples that work really well with the track and work really well with the track as things are moving around. Another thing sometimes I'll do is if I'm looking for atmospheres, I won't be afraid to go a few keys up or down because you can always pitch it around. This is one I didn't pitch, but I was adjusting the gain of. But some of these, it makes sense to move them. Move the pitch up and down so it follows the chord progression. Other times it just makes sense to have them playing whatever that root note is because you're securing yourself to the kind of key of the track, to whatever that is. So don't be afraid to do that too. So anyway, that's kind of the main fun stuff that we're going through here. Again, there's a lot more I could talk about, a lot more in terms of effects and other things like that. The snare roll's pretty standard, just samples and modulating the gain. I mean, there are a lot of ways you could do it. You could do it with velocity. I like just doing it with the gain because then it's easier for me to get the curves. The riser is a sound from Synth Master 1 that just, again, I've been using this sound for a while, and I think I have a video on how I did this. But just we're increasing that, and then this, I think this MIDI has the pitch built into the actual MIDI clip, so it's not actually automated. One thing that's weird about live is it can be picky about how you do the automation on some of these, whether or not you need something like what I've done here, where I made these Max for Live devices that do this and that. But sometimes with something like this, where I'm using this same 8-bar riser between different projects, I'll bake it into the MIDI so I can use this MIDI on different synth sounds and just be like, I know I want a sound that will go from the lowest to the highest point for 8 bars or for 4 bars, and I can have these MIDI clips saved with the MIDI CC map to it. And then all that needs to happen is I can just try out a bunch of different sounds. One of the things for these risers, you can just try out lead sounds. Find one that works well. What you're going to need to do is go in there and basically set the pitch bend range from what I usually do is -12 to +12, but you can also do -24 to +24. But I find -12 to +12 semitones will give you that 2-octave range that I think works really well for risers and things. But yeah, anyway, hopefully you found this helpful. Again, go ahead, like this video, subscribe if you found it helpful. But let me know in the comments if there's more you'd want to see, and definitely stick around. I got a lot of more fun, cool stuff coming. So see you in the next video. Bye-bye.